What instructional strategies, resources, technologies do you use to meet students' diverse learning needs?
I use some strategies I use are just allowing students to have choices in work, because I know every student doesn't learn the same. Resources, there's tons of resources, especially for online learning, such as Smarty Ants, Freckle, Myon, Achieve 3000 that I use to meet the diverse needs of my students.
As an educator, how do you promote social development and responsibility within a caring community where each student is treated fairly and respectfully?
I first build a relationship with my students, building that community, kind of teaching them that we are together as a class, as a family, and I believe when doing that, that does promote the social development and responsibility within the classroom, acting as a caring community. And with that, I look to treat each student fairly and respectfully.
As an educator, what do you value or care for the most?
As an educator, I value and care for the most is my students, how they're doing in their personal lives as well as how they're doing academically. That's the reason why I teach.
Would you agree caring, patience, and respect are indicators of a noble character? Can you explain?
Yes, I would definitely agree that those qualities make up a noble character, and just because having patience with each other is something that's hard to do, especially with dealing with elementary school students, and teaching them how to be patient with each other, be patient with their teachers, and being patient as a teacher, and also being caring and respectful to each other at all times. And then when that isn't happening, redirection occurs.
How do you promote norms and expectations in your classroom to increase learning experiences?
Norms and expectations are gone over daily as constant reminders to students that this is how we should be acting in class, and these are the expectations they need to meet up with. I like to start at the beginning of the year creating expectations as a class, and then going from there and having them all sign it as a social contract.
How are you working with families to support student learning?
A few ways I work with families is by being in contact with families through email, Parent Square app, through phone calls, checking in, seeing how I can help, especially with some students that may need more support than others. Also, I call and let parents know about things that their student has done that has been positive in the classroom.
Do you believe family is the key factor in student learning? Why or why not?
I do believe family is a key factor in student learning, just because I think the more support you have, the more prepared you'll be in life and also in education. However, some students don't have that, but that does not mean that they cannot be successful in the classroom.
What types of assessment are you using to assess student learning?
There's a few different assessments I use. Of course, the obvious like quizzes or tests, but sometimes after a lesson, a ticket out the door activity of what they remember from the lesson, or also just maybe a few problems as an exit ticket to check their understanding of subject matter.
How do you encourage your students to use and build critical thinking skills in the classroom?
I think I do this by just encouraging my students that they need to have a reason and be able to explain their answers, whether it's a class discussion or responses to a novel, or even if it's in math, not just saying the answer, but explaining it in detail.
How do you use formative assessment in your classroom?
Formative assessments, I use different assignments, whether it's responses to novel questions, some math problems from after we complete a lesson, they'll work on some math problems. I also try to do some creative assignments by having them do some drawings with also facts and history.
How do you use summative assessment in your classroom?
I use quizzes, tests, papers, so things that usually we'll prepare and review for over an extended period of time, and it's worth a higher percentage of their grade.
What are some examples of the feedback you give your students in the classroom?
I like to give my students feedback in every aspect, so whether it's positive or it's redirection or if it's simply just working with them in small groups, reading with them, or also reviewing their writings and helping them become better writers, and also becoming better at using their math skills or being better at interacting with the text.
Do you utilize student collaboration in your class? If so, can you please give examples?
Oh, absolutely. I love group work. I think that we can all learn from each other, and I think it gives students a way to be leaders. So group work's to create a presentation, group work and dissecting an article. For example, if it's a 5-paragraph article, have 5 students in the group and each to get a paragraph to look at, and they come together as a group for an assignment.
What are your thoughts on standardized testing?
I think standardized testing, I have mixed feelings about it sometimes. I think some students just aren't good test takers, so it's hard for that to be the main way to assess a student, or one of the main ways they are tested. But I also do think it's a good way for students to continue to be to kind of review things so they don't lose it throughout the year. So I think it's a good way to review everything they've learned throughout the year or from previous years.
What are some strategies you use to motivate your students to do well?
A lot of it has to do with positive phone calls home. When we were in class, it was things like candy, or being able to spin a wheel to maybe pick the music for class during independent writing time, or even just doing fun little things like little pencils, erasers, or little toys I can get from the Dollar Tree or something, and they could work hard for that.
How do you stay sensitive and inclusive to cultural practices and traditions of your students?
I think that kind of goes back to the beginning of the interview. I said I build that relationship with students, find out kind of where they're from, what kind of community they live in, and just always being able to recognize that and know that all of my students are different, they grow up different, and to be sensitive to those kind of things.
All right, thank you.